Okay. Well, we are at the hour, so welcome to another session of the AUS training series where all topics tie back to the key tasks identified in the AUS position description or PD. Since the PD says what we have to know how to do, this class series focuses on the skills and topics that speak directly to what the PD says we need to know. And we do that because if we can get the fundamentals covered, we'll do great things as AUSs and add our unique value to our customers, facilities, and veterans. The topic at the root of everything we and contracting do are regulations. I'm Stephen Clements, a WISNIC AUS, that's Western States Network Consortium, if you haven't heard of it before, and I'll be your guide through this topic. I spent several years in VA contracting, switched sides to the good life of being an AUS, and earned the highest certification in contracting, the FACC Level 3. My lovely assistant and fellow AUS, Martin Wallace, will be monitoring the chat because I'll ask you some questions along the way, and he'll be happy to help with your general questions in the chat. Martin has also earned his FACC certification, which I encourage anybody on this call to do because you do not have to be a contracting specialist or officer to get one. That's per the policy. And if you have a question specifically for me, please let me know at the end of the class because we'll stick around to talk about what's on your mind for as long as we have things to talk about. And before we cover the regulations and how to use them, how well do we already know them? Please put your answer in the chat. Is this class even needed because you're already experts and you're just here for the CLP or you like my baritone voice? And what regulations am I even talking about?
I don't know, Stephen. There's nothing coming in yet.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I mean, for some reason, I've got on the slide that these regulations govern how we buy what we need. I don't know. That might be important. It might not.
Let's see. I got some answers now. Jeanette says pretty informed, but they always change, so class is needed.
That is true.
Carla Copen said not well enough.
Yeah, and
Stephen Hewitt came in with regs are important, I think.
sometimes regulations and laws have some bearing on what we in the government do. Maybe it's a good idea for us to know them. And that comment from Jeanette is particularly germane to this class because virtually instantly after I gave last year's version of this, Big VA went and changed a bunch of things, and so I had to rewrite quite a bit to make this up to date. So we will get to that. And the intended audience for this class is the AUS job series, although all are welcome. I've had dental techs, I've had contracting branch chiefs tell their people to come to these classes. I got contracting officers coming here. I got AUSs, I got CLOs. If you touch a contract, the AUSPD series will have useful information for you. So if you know somebody that'll benefit from that kind of stuff in the future, feel free to let us know. I'll get them added to the distro list. And our task and purpose will get us to our desired outcome. And our task is to familiarize the AUS with the regulations and interpretive sources that govern contracting. Our purpose in doing so is that greater familiarity with the regulations will improve the contract document quality we make and AUS work performance as a result. The more we know, the better we can do it. Our desired outcome is that attendees will learn what the regulations and interpretive sources are, how to navigate them, and how to use them. We're going to meet those criteria by looking at topics such as what does AUS have to do with regulations? What are they? How do you learn them? How do you use them? And we'll go through some examples together. And we'll finish by summarizing what we covered, and I'll point you to opportunities for further training. So, next question. What does the AUS have to do with acquisition regulations? What use do we have for them? Please drop your answers in the chat. Acquisition Utilization Specialist. It might have something. I don't know. I mean, it does have acquisition in both names. And no need to write War and Peace. Just a quick thought.
Yeah,
Why am
Julius
I
jumped in and said for
lecturing on
guidance.
this? Well, So sounds probably good.
Yeah, I think he may be the only response. Oh, wait a minute. James Perez, he's always got some good ones here lately, but obey them.
Pretty
Jeanette said,
lawful of you.
yeah, Jeanette said, need to know for pre-award tasks.
Okay.
Carlos says, make sure procurement is in line with them.
That sounds like a good idea.
Keep us out of jail. Thanks, Stephen.
You know what? I don't want to go to jail, so anything that'll keep me out of jail, I'm pretty happy with. So those sound good.
Heather said, follow, understand, and pass along info to services.
Yeah, that's good. And I checked the AUSPD to see what it had to say, and our PD says we're supposed to know a lot about regulations. We can see from the quotes that the AUS is required to serve as the expert advisor on contracting and acquisitions for their facility. You can see the terms FAR, VAR, law, regulations, and policies all highlighted. And the AUS is charged with knowing federal acquisition laws and regulations so well we can not only develop processes and procedures using them, but we are knowledgeable enough and understand them so well that we can render expert opinions on them when they don't speak to a topic or are unclear. Expert opinions. It's like we're supposed to know something about them. And we're supposed to understand these regulations so well, additionally, that we can teach other people what they mean. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. We're to train our customers and cores on these topics and write tools to help them with their contracts. We must be capable of doing deep dives into the regs. And the first key factor required by our PD points out we are to essentially be walking encyclopedias of acquisition regulations and policies. The second PD factor speaks to regulations extensively enough, it gets its own slide. So drink it in. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but these highlighted sections may speak to points we already discussed. But look in the middle of the slide. I will read part of that to you. Engage in professional discourse to resolve varying differences in interpretation and execution. That right there requires us to be contract professionals because we have to be able to discuss contracting issues in a sophisticated enough manner to qualify as professional level authorities on the subject. The Federal Acquisition Institute was established to foster the education and certification of contracting professionals, and our PD stipulates that we are among them. Again and again, we see the PD requiring us to know the regulations and to be our facilities guide on how to work with them. Knowing the regulations and how to interpret them is critical for the AUS to be able to do our jobs in getting what our customers need. In reading the whole thing, ultimately our PD requires us to know as much about contracting as contracting knows about contracting. And all that starts with knowing federal contracting regulations. Well, why? Why did the VA create Acquisition Utilization Specialists and tell us we need to know all that? Isn't that contracting's job? Well, it is, but it's also ours. Contracting, some people might interpret them as being stingy with what they know, but they would have good reason if they are in fact being stingy, because back in 2008, what I called the Great Separation happened in contracting. Who used to be co-located with the hospitals they served were moved out. They were taken out of our chain of command and given their own. They were given their own offices. So not only were they separated organizationally from us, but also physically. And that's important because their knowledge of contracting was stuck in their heads, and their heads can only be in one place at a time. If those heads are not at the facilities, they're that much further away from our end users who directly serve veterans. And our facilities suffered from the brain drain. And some people might say, but we got this virtual environment nowadays. We have these teams setups we can do, just like we're doing right now. Well, I do bring up the fact of out of sight, out of mind is a real thing. And any additional buttons you got to pick or any additional effort you got to go to get in touch with somebody, those are increased opportunity costs, and a lot of people won't make the effort to overcome them. But in 2016, VA created us to fill the gap, making us the designated advisors for our facilities on how to legally get them what they need to take care of our veterans. And we currently have 483 full-time employee slots across the country, and they're mostly full. We got about 300 or so AUS is hired on, and we're seated mostly at the facility level, but also We have some at the VISN and consortium levels to advise our leadership there. So, if we're to be these contracting experts, what makes you a contracting expert? Knowing the regulations and how to use them. That's what. The power for the federal government to buy anything comes from the regulations we're talking about. Those regs tell us how we can buy things, and they tell us who can spend federal dollars. Not just any federal employee can do that. For anything we're going to buy, only a warranted contracting officer or someone sponsored by a contracting officer can legally spend VA money. Well, why is that? Because an agency's authority to contract is vested in the head of the agency, such as the VA secretary, who then delegates that authority down in a chain that ultimately ends at the contracting officer, according to 48 CFR 1601. And see, we already got regulations popping up. And here's where our mastery of the regs as AUSs come in handy, because our job is to advise our customers on how to get the items they need in the smartest, most effective manners. And please do mute your mics because I hear someone having a conversation. Most of the time, us helping our customers will take the form of helping them plan their contracts and write the documents required of us when we send requirements packages to contracting. We teach our customers how to do all that to standard, a good standard that contracting will accept, and we provide the quality review of those packages, because when we help our customers send those packages in, we have a professional obligation to make sure all the documents capture our customers' true needs and that contracting is receiving everything they need from us to take it and run. And to put it a different way, the better we know the regulations that underpin everything we do in acquisition efforts, the better we can serve our veterans. What are those regulations I keep talking about? I keep saying that they're the source of our buying power, but what are these things? Well, one we just saw, Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. Those are regulations made by Congress through their laws, and certain federal agency actions can constitute things that go into the CFR. Now, the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, is a particular chapter within the CFR that's dedicated to procurement rules, and we spend most of our time in the FAR. But the VA, like many agencies, has their own regulations called the VAR, Veterans Affairs Acquisition Regulations, and that supplemental material VA adds to the FAR. We can't take away anything from the FAR because the FAR trumps the VAR, but we can add to the FAR, and that's one of the ways we do it with the VAR. Now, both FAR and VAR may have deviations to them, and these are approved exceptions that clarify or allow exemptions or do some small changes to the FAR and VAR. And generally, deviations are future additions to the FAR or VAR that just haven't gone through the full process by the powers that be yet to get added in. But they are something that you should be aware of. And then Congress comes back up because we have the Competition and Contracting Act, or CICA. And that is a act they passed in 1984 that established the preference for competition in government contracting that dominates the spirit and the work that we have to do in buying things. And these regulations we're looking at here, these are legally binding authoritative sources. These are not opinions, these are rules. So now that you know what they are, you might be saying, Stephen, I'm so excited about federal regulations. Or you might not, but just in this hypothetical case, you are. And I'd love to read these things, but where do I find them? Well, I've got you covered because this slide provides hyperlinks to every one of those. You just go to the purple sections I've got on the screen, and you can control click through to them. And all these have been updated once you get a copy of the slides, which you're welcome to after the class. So those regulations are not always clear on how to use them, though. Fortunately, we have several sources that help us interpret them and show us how to use them. Bear in mind that whatever these sources on the screen tell you, these are not regulations and cannot overrule regulations. However, these sources will guide you in serving your customers and will guide you in doing what you need to do. They contain standard operating procedures, or SOPs, the forms we need to use, and more helpful stuff. To go down the list, The VHA Procurement Manual, or PM, that used to be the primary go-to for interpreting regs for VA and contracting. It no longer is, though. Shortly into 2022, like I mentioned just after I gave this class last year, the most useful parts of the PM were taken out, and it now mostly holds SOPs that only contracting will regularly use. But there's some neat stuff in there. It could behoove you to check them out. The best parts for us were moved over to the VHA Procurement Guide, or PG, and it tells you exactly which documents you need, provides the most updated versions of those forms, and provides instructions on how to use them. The VHA Customer Reference Guide, or CRG, takes that procurement guide guidance, adds in some extra, and presents a customer focused contract planning guide. It's written for non contracting professionals to try to help them out. And the VA Acquisition Manual, or VAM, it doesn't focus on just one part of the VA like the previous three do. Those previous three are aimed at VHA. The VAM is for VHA, VBA, NCA, VACO, all parts of VA. It doesn't provide much guidance in the way of commonly needed information, but if you're looking for an answer and you can't find it anywhere else, check the VAM. It may have it. Then we got procurement policy memorandums, or PPMs. They spell out niche topics that relate to contracting, but aren't usually the nuts and bolts items you're going to use every day. But when they have something to say, they're pretty darn helpful. GAO protest opinions. These things can be great guides for the kinds of challenges we face in procurements, because these are opinions rendered by the Federal Government Accountability Office when vendors protest the contract actions we've taken. And so they provide real world examples of what VA did, or any federal agency did, the vendors that objected to it, and then GAO's opinion of who followed the regulations and interpretations most appropriately and most correctly. And then the GAO will say who they think is right and who's wrong. I also think they're entertaining reading. And same thing here. As with the last slide, all the purple sections are hyperlinks. And so now that we've covered the regulations and interpretive guides, what do we do with them? Well, we learn them. If contracting officers become contracting officers because they learn how to use the regulations, and we're charged with knowing everything about contracting the contracting knows, we must know how to use these regulations. And how do you learn them? And how do you become experts? There are several ways. They're all important. They all play a part. The single most critical piece to mastering the regulations is taking one of the foundational classes that the VA Acquisition Academy, or VAAA, has to offer. On the slide, I've got an example, Con 1100. Sometimes it's listed as Con 1100V, and that's being phased in to replace Con 091, which is there's still sessions of it going on. Con 91 requires 13 days in class to mostly learn how the regulations work and the basics of contracting. Con 1100 is only 46 hours, or a little over a week. And if both of those sound like a lot, well, it is a lot, and it has to be, because there are lots of regulations and they require lots of study to understand, and it takes time to get them to sink in. And even with classes that long, it still isn't enough, because almost every contracting class after those initial ones continue exploring the regs and the sources that we've went over. When I went through the older version of both of those, Con 90, it was a month long, two-week classes. And so while Con 1100 is going to be the future cornerstone of learning the regulations, there's three other methods you can use to increase your knowledge. This monthly AUSPD class series is a great tool for familiarizing yourself with key contracting concepts and how to use them. And in every one of these classes, we crowbar in as many appropriate authoritative sources and interpretive source references, and encourage you to go check those out. Many network contracting offices, or NCOs, they have training officers who provide monthly classes to help train the cores in their VISN, and they often have good material to share. So check into it. See, does your NCO training officer provide regular classes? And if they do, get in on them, because they're they're going to have something interesting in them, and they're usually worth a CLP as well, so you can have that to show for it. And there's other kinds of direct effort you can do, such as straight up reading these sources, on the job training of researching acquisition topics as you need to. That's a great way to learn them, and also to see if there's updates. And similarly, shadowing a better versed AUS or a contracting officer, those are great ways to learn how we work with the regs, because they're going to be working with them regularly. They'll know where to take you and show you where the neat stuff's at and what you need to do. And I'm sure there's other methods. However, none of those last three can replace the value of taking one of those academy classes. I'm going to beat that drum, because it takes a lot of work to get competent with these things, and there's no replacement for the kind of training the academy has to offer. So we looked at 5 authoritative sources and 6 interpretive sources. How many of those do you regularly use? Please drop your answer in the chat. Regularly means whatever you decide it does. But if you need some guidance, I would say maybe once a week. And did I miss any sources that you use? You also
Heather says
mentioned
3.
those. 3, okay, all right. That's good.
I don't think anybody else wants to take a stab at it.
Oh, well, I find that it takes some time from the fingers to do the tippy tap to the answers to show up. I don't know why it takes so long, but
This one can't be Googled, so.
and in other classes, when people do the Google cut and paste, I can tell. We can tell. Yeah.
Jeanette says she uses the FAR, the VAM, the FAR. I'm saying VAR, VAM, FAR, ActFlash, and GovNews.
Those are good. Yeah, ActFlash and GovNews. Those are interpretive sources. That's good. All right. And so that's a lot of regs that I mentioned, and then Jeanette mentioned a couple more. Do you really need to know all of these? The technical answer is yes. If you're going to be a contract expert, which your PD says you're supposed to be, yes, you need to know all of those. However, the practical answer is you need to know them as needed. Which ones would I encourage you to focus your study time on? I got them listed on the screen. That's the FAR, the VAR, the PG, and the CRG. Because these cover practically everything an AUS is going to regularly need to advise our customers, plan our acquisitions, and create the documents we need to send to contracting. And so, to give a little more detail about why I picked those, we're going to take a just slightly deeper look into each of them. The FAR, this one. This is the fundamental authoritative source. It's built directly on the laws, and the FAR covers every facet of writing contracts and acquisitions. Do you need to know what kinds of contracts exist? Well, the FAR is going to tell you what they are. Do you need to know how key terms are defined? Because contracts are made up of words, and and these are legally enforceable words, so it's important to know what those words mean. Well, the FAR's got a whole bunch of definitions of key terms in there that it'll behoove you to know how those words are interpreted. Dollar thresholds often make a difference in what we're doing. So, what are those dollar thresholds, and how do they determine what we need to do with them? Well, the FAR addresses those. On and on and on. Everything starts with the FAR. The VAR, what you do is, after checking to see what the FAR has to say about a topic, your next step is to go to the VAR and see if it has anything to add. Um, and then you go on and you check the other sources, but FAR then VAR, because, like we mentioned, the VAR can build on the FAR. And so there might be additional information you need to know about a given topic in the VAR after you've checked in the FAR. Now, if you check the FAR and then go to the VAR and you don't find anything on that topic in the VAR is silent. and that's okay. You can just go with what the FAR is talking about. And if for every contract you work, you go down this list and see what each of these sources have to say, you're going to be covered on almost all your bases. And when we work our examples later, you'll see how they can build on each other. The PG, that takes the regulations and spells out what you and contracting actually need to do with them to make a contract happen. And like I mentioned, it also has the most up-to-date forms you're going to need. The CRG, that takes all that information we just talked about and presents it for general audiences. So this is a good tool for you to give to your customers, to your cores, to your contracting laymen, because it holds their hands and tells them exactly which forms they need to fill out. It's got hyperlinks, it's got examples, it's got simple instructions how to make a requirements package. And I find it to still be a useful reference for us because I've spent plenty of time in the CRG um, checking, mining for helpful information I can share with others. And so that's what they have to offer. Now, how do you navigate them? Starting with the FAR, the FAR is organized by topic into chapters known as parts, which we'll look at on the next slide. And when you visit the FAR, you can either go chapter by chapter on an index looking for what you want, or you can use a search engine hyperlinked on the slide to look for key terms. And the VAR, it's organized by part like the FAR, but only includes language that adds two corresponding FAR parts like we just talked about. To find the VAR part corresponding to the FAR part, you take the FAR part number and you add either an 8 or an 80, and there you go. That'll get you to the VAR part. So if you've got a FAR part 1, then if you're going to look for supplemental information in the VAR, it's going to be 801. If you look and find no VAR listing, again, the VAR is silent. It has nothing to add to the FAR. And that search engine link in the FAR section, you can also use that to search for keywords in the VAR. Now, the PG is organized like the VAR. It corresponds to the FAR accordingly. So if you've got a VAR number and you go to the PG, just look for that VAR number and it's going to get you to what it has to say. And unfortunately, it is not searchable. You have to look part by part down the index on the website to see if what you want's covered. However, if you find the VAR part, you can look for that number on the index and that'll get you there. The PG does have all those documents that we talked about that you're going to need for your requirements package. And when you're looking for those documents, they're almost always going to be found at the bottom of the page. So no worries getting lost in walls of text. Just skip down to the bottom of the page, and like 99% of the time, what you're looking for is there. And that is important because every time I make a package, I make sure to go to the PG to make sure I'm getting the most up-to-date version of the form I'm using, because it's annoying that you think you have a relatively up-to-date version, you fill it all out, send it into contracting, contracting eventually gets around to your package, and then some analyst somewhere dings your contracting officer because you're not using the latest and greatest version of the form, which changed exactly nothing on the form except for the version number. So go ahead and save yourself and your contracting officer the trouble. And every time you make a package or your customer makes a package, go check the PG to make sure you got the most up-to-date version. And the CRG, instead of trying to mirror the organization of the FAR and VAR, like the PG does, the CRG groups information by related topics, and it's not searchable. So if you so you do need to look at the index for the topic you want and see if it's covered. But again, it's focused on like core duties and making a requirements package. So anything beyond that, it's not really going to have anything. And to provide a handy reference to you, here's a listing of every FAR part and the topic each covers. These are the same topics the FAR or the VAR and PG will cover if they have any additions or clarifications. I encourage you to keep the slide handy, so if you ever need an idea of where to find something, this gives you a place to start. Because say you need to do market research, well, FAR Part 10, market research, might tell you what you're doing. If you need help coming up with ideas of how to write a performance work statement or statement of work or statement of objectives, the very next one down, describing agency needs. FAR Part 11 might be a good place to look. If you're not spending a whole lot of money and you're trying to see if you can do something, a contract in an easier way, FAR Part 13, Simplified Acquisition Procedures. I want to check in there. If you're getting service contracts, like say you're doing some maintenance on a fire alarm system, FAR Part 37, Service Contracting. Go check it out, and on and on and on. So that's all great. Some might say, but Stephen, I'm just an AUS. I don't really need to know all that stuff. I'm just a clerk. I send stuff to contracting, and then they tell me what I need to fix, and then I fix it, and I don't add any value. I don't think too hard. My day's easy. My life's uncomplicated. I don't really need to know all this stuff. I can just do what my contracting officer tells me. Right? Not really going to use all this, am I? Yes, you are going to use it. If you found yourself rolling your eyes, messing around on your phone, or doing something else while I talked about the most important thing underpinning our jobs, because you don't think you'll really use them, you'd be wrong. As we looked at in the PD, you are required to know these things. And if you're doing your job, as your PD says you should, you will absolutely use these on the regular. And how do I know you're going to use these regs? Without a shadow of a doubt, because the documents we and our customers fill out and send to contracting to get contracts have the regs baked in. You can see what parts of the FAR, PG, VAR, uh, let's say that's what we got covered. This go into every form that we've got to mess with. If you ever get a message from your CO saying you're missing something, it's because the regs said this form needed to speak to certain details that your CO didn't see in what you gave them. And this slide illustrates how many FAR, VAR, and PG parts you have to account for in filling out the documents you and your customers are responsible for. If you didn't like those citations, well, I'm going to get into screenshots. Here you can see a screenshot from the Streamline Market Research Report. And that screenshot cites 1, 2, 3 different FAR parts and a VAR part, and that's just one screenshot. The formal acquisition plan, it would have been too messy to screenshot, but I counted. It references the FAR approximately 60 times, and it references the VAR twice and deviations once. It's written into the documents themselves that we have to know what we're doing with these things. And if you want to sole source anything, you can't do so without backing from the regulations. Look at these screenshots. These are taken directly from the most up-to-date versions of the sole source justification. You even see US code popping up a lot. And there's a PPM. All that stuff we talked about, it's all in here. So now that we've covered the sources and how to use them, let's work a few examples. We have 4 topics we're going to look at, and each are important to our work. First, the dollar value of the things we buy. We touched on that earlier. It tells us what we have to do. So what do the sources say about dollar thresholds? How do they define them? Next, SDVOSBs are very important considerations for our contracting processes. So what are they? And what kind of preferential treatment can they receive? Finally, the FAR, the VAR regulations. Are these rules that tell us exactly what we have to do at all times, and we have to color inside the lines? We can't ever do anything different. We can't try things that, can we not try things that aren't addressed by the FAR, VAR, or any of that? We're going to take a look at these topics and see what the sources have to say. So we're going to go on Safari and answer those questions. Be just one moment. Share my screen. All right. So, first place I'd recommend you go in any of these sources, first place I recommend you go is acquisition.gov. And this says big button right here in the middle, access the federal acquisition regulation. You can click here to browse the FAR and go look at the index, or you can go here to go to the search engine. Starting right now, go here. And I've got 2 different indices I can use. I can either just scroll down this page and it's got part and it's got the title of what it's about, and I can just click on this, or I can click on the hyperlink to get more information. Also, as you're navigating through here, the main part of the page here, this index, this sidebar stays up. So if you think you need to go somewhere else, you can hover over one of these numbers and it's going to tell you what the topic is. So far, part 29, that's on taxes. 12, acquisition of commercial items. 6, this is competition requirements. So if you need something to jog your memory, well, there you go. You can do that. And since the question was about dollar thresholds, well, first place I'd recommend you go and in any of these sources for definitions is FAR Part 2, definitions of words and terms. So let's go there. And as we mentioned, contracts rely on precise wording to tell vendors what we want and how the contracts will be managed. So understanding how the regulations define words and terms is critically important. So let's see. We want to check out dollar thresholds. Well, there's a whole bunch of text here. So I am going to Control F and put in threshold. The easiest way to get started. And the very first mention we've got is right here, thresholds. Major system, and this is a subsection of major system. This is not something VA really does. This is usually used for major systems come into play when you're making like a battleship or something like that. So, and it mentions Department of Defense. I think we might skip that. So, we got hit right here. Micro purchase threshold. All right, we have a definition. Micro purchase threshold means buying stuff using simplified procedures, the amount of which does not exceed the micro purchase threshold. Well, what's that? Conveniently, it's right here. Micro purchase threshold means 10,000, except for in these enumerated cases, it can go higher, but in general, it's $10,000. Okay. And so, what else do we have? That's a micro purchase, but what do we do above $10,000? Well, we kept going down and now we see simplified acquisition threshold means 250 grand except for in these situations. And it spells out those situations. And look, it includes hyperlinks to US codes that might help flesh out what you're looking into to help you get a better understanding of the situation. So, all right. So we got 250 grand. And what's the threshold above 250 grand called? Well, we don't see anything else. So looks like we have micro purchase threshold, simplified acquisition threshold, and anything above simplified acquisition threshold is above the simplified acquisition threshold. This falls into that. Now the VAR, let's go see what the VAR has to say. And you can also get to the VAR from acquisition.gov. You can go here, hover over this, and it'll pop up the link to the FAR as well as the supplemental regulations a bunch of different agencies include. So if you want to see how Department of Defense did something, you might go over here. If you want to see how the Justice Department does things, you could go over here. But VAR, right there. And so we're already here. And again, we have a sidebar index as well as an index of what it has to say. And well, here we go. FAR 806 and 808. Well, what happened to 807? The fact that there's not an 807 means that whatever 7's for in the VAR doesn't have anything to add to it. So there's an illustration of that. But in the FAR, we're in 802, or in FAR Part 2. So let's go to 802. Get into definitions. Let's see. Well, I did the Control F to find threshold, and there's zero examples came up. So doesn't look like the FAR or the VAR has anything to say about that. But let's try micro purchase. Nope, nothing. Let's try simplified. Nope, nothing there. So VAR has nothing to say about those thresholds we just looked at. What about procurement guide? And this is what it looks like. If you want to get to the PM, it's over here. If you want to go to the PG table of contents, it's right there. And here's the table of contents. And you'll see there's several different listings, or can be several different listings for a PG part. They try to keep it as accessible as possible, and each page is narrowly focused as they can. But here is PG Part 802101, acronyms, glossary of terms. That sounds about right. And so, unfortunately, this table isn't set up the best. This isn't some wonky display because of my own browser. It's whoever sets up the PG page makes it to where you have to, unless you make everything so small that you can't read it, you have to scroll back and forth to find things. But you have um, the thing that needs to describing, a description of it, and then additional information concerning it. So let's see what it has to say about threshold. So it looks like we've got three. First one says, in an amount exceeding the micro purchase threshold. Okay, is this what we want? BAA. Well, that doesn't sound like micro purchase threshold. It just references it. By American Act. Okay, well, we're going to skip past this for now, but we can see that our micro purchase threshold and things going, amounts going above it, we might need to know more about this and look at this. We have a US code and we have a link to take us to more information. May be useful for later. So micro purchase threshold, there we go. And it gives us a shorter kind of rule of thumb description of it. Generally under $10,000. Exceptions are for Davis-Bacon Act and Service Contract Act. Well, what are those? You could go back to the FAR to see if it had anything to say about it, or you could Google them, but it points you to where you might find more information. And simplified acquisition threshold. We saw that in the FAR. And here we have an acronym for it, the SAT, because the PG is good for giving you acronyms, you might see here. And then it doesn't give us a definition. Now, that's weird, but that's what the PG has to say about it. All right. So we found what our definitions are there. And one thing I want to point out is that while FAR 2, FAR Part 2 and FAR Part 2, 802 and PG 802 have a lot of definitions, unfortunately, there's a bunch of definitions squirreled into a bunch of different sections, so a bunch of different parts. So if you look in here in FAR Part 2 and don't find the definition you're looking for, go to the FAR part or VAR part that most closely matches what you're looking into. And there may be more definitions at the beginning of that part for you to check out. There's a lot to know about these things. All right. So we also mentioned service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, SDVOSBs. We're encouraged to use them, and the regulations give them certain preferences. But what are they? Well, let's see what we got. Service disabled. Oh, there we are. I didn't even have to finish typing it. So service disabled veteran-owned small business concern means a small business concern, not less than 51% of which is owned by one or more service disabled veterans, or the stock is owned by them, and the management and daily operations are controlled by one or more service disabled veterans, or in the case of a service disabled veteran with permanent and severe disability, the spouse or permanent caregiver of such a veteran. So it's not enough that a service disabled veteran owns 51%, at least 51% of the company. They also have to be actively directing it, or in this case, their spouse or permanent caregiver is actively directing it. So if you come across an SDVOSB where the service disabled veteran doesn't know nothing and ain't involved in anything, somebody's violating the definition. But what is a service disabled veteran? Well, here it says it means a veteran as defined by this U.S. code with a disability that is service connected as defined by this U.S. code. See, these references are popping up all over the place. All right. So that's what a service disabled veteran owned small business is in the FAR. Now, what is it in the VAR? Okay, well, actually, we get two definitions. Here's an acronym, SDVOSB/VOSB. That's an initialism, and it's got some information there. But the definition of a service disabled veteran owned small business It says a lot the same things as FAR 2 101 does, except for acquisitions authorized by this U.S. code and Veterans First Contracting Program, and they must be listed in the VIP database. So here we see an additional requirement the VAR adds to the FAR, because this was not mentioned in the FAR. Oh, what's this? In addition, some SDVSB listed in the VIP database may be owned and controlled by a surviving spouse. So in the untimely or unfortunate obviously unfortunate passing of a service disabled veteran that owned one of these businesses, their surviving spouse can keep it going. Well, what's a surviving spouse? Bam, the VAR gives us a definition and a lot of detail about what a surviving spouse is. This could be useful information for you to have. And what does the PG have to say about this? Service disabled. Okay. Here we've got the acronym. Here we've got the name, service disabled veteran owned small business. And we have a procurement policy manual reference here that we could check out. And here we see that it's got the same definition as the FAR, and then it rolls in additional definition from the VAR and talks to the surviving spouse that the VAR mentions. So here the PG gives us a all-in-one, fairly detailed definition and some additional information to look at. So we've got SDVSBs. We know they get preferences. Well, how can we learn about those preferences? I don't know that we're going to find anything in FAR Part 2 that's really going to talk about that. So let's go to the search and just drop in SDVOSB and see what happens. We're encouraged to use SDVSBs and regulations, and we're told the regulations give us preferences, but what are these things? Well, we'll just go with the first thing we get. So apparently in FAR 18116, we can give them sole source awards. Let's check that out. Okay, so, and what is FAR 18? That is emergency acquisitions. Okay, so we can give sole source awards to SDVOSBs in emergency circumstances. Well, that's good to know. And you got just a little bit of text here, but it references FAR Part 19. Well, what is that? FAR Part 19. Okay, it talks about sole source awards to SDVOSBs. Well, the other 18 just said we could do it. So what is 19? Small business programs. Let's take a look at that. Small business programs. We've got additional definitions right here. We have size standards, policies, and let's see what else we got. We've got small business administration. We have set asides, reserves. That's interesting. And let's see, the 8A program. That's a type of small business that could be useful to you. You got hub zone small businesses. That could be useful. The service disabled veteran owned small business procurement program. What does that say? It says all this stuff right here. Now, it defines them. It talks about set asides. So we can give them set asides. That's nice. Oh, we can give them sole source awards too. That's pretty neat. And well, if you want to learn more about sole source awards, you might want to go to this FAR Part 6302 right there. But I think for what we're doing, this is as far as we need to go. Well, what does the VAR have to say about this? Well, it seemed like Part 19 was really good. So let's go over to the VAR, go to 819. See how that works? You add the 8 to the beginning and scroll on down. And it talks about set asides and all that too. And let's see. Okay. Service disabled veteran owned small business set asides and sole sources to them. Oh, wait, it also says veteran owned small business set asides and sole sources to veteran owned small businesses, but the FAR doesn't appear to give set asides or sole sources to veteran owned small businesses, only service disabled veteran owned small businesses. So here again, the VAR adds to what the FAR is talking about. So these are additional resources we have to facilitate contracting with veteran-owned small businesses in addition to the SDVOSBs. That's cool. There's one other thing here I want to point out. So we can sole source. All right, we can sole source to SDVOSBs. Here, it says that the contracting officer shall consider a contract award to an SDVOSB on a sole source basis before considering small business set-asides. So before looking at any other type of small business, assuming the contract officer does not have a reasonable expectation that 2 or more SDVOSBs will give him a good offer, and the anticipated award value of the contract doesn't exceed 7 million for NAICS codes for manufacturing or 4 million for anything else. And somehow the SBA can appeal the CO's decision to not use this authority. Well, that's good stuff to know. And you've got all these other references you could go check for more information. So that's what the FAR does with SDVOSB sole sources. Well, if you look at the VAR authority, it says the CO can do this with a different dollar amount, and NAICS code doesn't even come up. So this is a different authority than what the FAR gave us. And also, if you take a good look at this, the CO doesn't even have to see if they don't have to count any heads. There doesn't have to be, any number of SDVOSBs that could quote on it. If a CO wants to do a sole source to an SDVOSB, they can. Doesn't matter if there's 2 that they could compete it amongst, they could just do it to 1. And SBA doesn't get to protest anything. This could be useful for information for you to have. All right, and so we've got all that, and we've highlighted some differences between FAR and VAR. Does the PG have anything to say about this? We're going to go up to the table of contents, and we're going to come down to 819 because we found all this stuff in 19. Well, here we got the first one I click, small business program. It doesn't really have much to say about that, but there's multiple listings for 819. Sole source awards to verified SDVOSBs and VOSBs. So this one page is going to cover both of those topics. That's good. You get instructions here. You get all these hyperlinks to different stuff that you need to check out. And then here you have attachment 1. This is the form justification for other than full and open competition greater than $250,000, which is a SAT, is what we covered earlier, in accordance with this FAR part right here. So this gives you some instructions on how to write up the proposed sole source to a SDVOSB or VOSB. It gives you the form and all the references you could possibly want to be educated in doing so. So that's the PG is valuable. It's some good stuff. Now, the last example we're going to look at is the topic of, are these regulations straitjackets? Do they tell us everything that we have to do? Well, I'm going to go to FAR Part 1, Federal Acquisition Regulation System, that gives us the philosophy and describes what the FAR does, and see if we can't find the answer there. Now, I happen to know that 1102-4, role of the acquisition team. Now, this section E right here, you're going to find a critical piece of the FAR's fundamental philosophy. And I think it's very powerful. To read it to you briefly, the FAR outlines procurement policies and procedures that are used by members of the acquisition team, of which you are a part. Even if you're not the decision-making authority on it, you are an important part of it. If a policy or procedure or particular strategy or practice is in the best interest of the government and is not specifically addressed in the FAR, nor prohibited by law, executive order, or other regulation, government members of the team should not assume it's prohibited. Rather, absence of direction should be interpreted as permitting the team to innovate and use sound business judgment that is otherwise consistent with law and within limits of their authority. So AUSs, we can recommend things. COs, they get the final call. And contracting officers should take the lead in encouraging business process innovations and ensuring that business decisions are sound. So you can see the FAR is not a series of obstacles telling you what you can't do, and you can only do this one thing, and instead it's an empowering document. And the White House memo that just came out updating the FACC program says much the same thing. If an idea is good, but the FAR doesn't say anything about it, and the idea is legal and the idea is ethical, you can try it. It can be done. A lot of people don't understand the full potential of what the FAR, the VAR, all that allows us to do in pursuing better service of our veterans. A lot of COs are afraid of their own power. But as my favorite VAAA instructor, Legs McIntyre, loved to tell us, was step into your power. And once again, as AUSs, is to be the best advisors we can possibly be and to come up with the best ideas we possibly can, and COs to pursue what you think is the best policy for your customers. FAR wants us to pursue excellence. And now let me get back to the slides and we will finish this out. All right, so in summary, knowing contracting is the AUS job. And the regulations are at the root of everything we do. The better we know them, the better we can advise our customers and make better contracts. And the better contracts we can make equal better care for our veterans. And remember, the FAR is your friend. The VAR loves you. The PM doesn't really like anybody, but that's okay. So for future study, to learn regulations, how to work with them, I enthusiastically recommend that you take one of the two foundational con courses we talked about. So you got details on Con 91. There's still offerings for it, but it's going to be replaced eventually by Con 1100, and they are big time commitments. But I assure you, they'll be well worth your time for professional development. And for those who've taken either of those, you can take FCN 195 as a refresher and to reground ourselves in the broad issues. But if you haven't taken one of those first two, don't even look at that third one. Go do one of those first two first. And so, for my last question to you, my beloved and exceedingly good-looking audience, who's above average in every respect, did you find that this class helped you learn for the first time or refresh your knowledge of acquisition regulations? Please put your answer in the chat or email us afterwards. We do get emails. We like seeing them. And if it did help you, great. What did you find most helpful? If we didn't, what did we miss? What would have made this more helpful as a general introduction to the regulations and the interpretive sources? Because we want to make this class as useful as possible. Martin, what do we think?
Yes. This helps a lot. Very helpful. Thumbs up. Great training.
Great. I like it. Oh, that came from a contracting branch chief. I like that.
Yep.
All right. Well, Martin and I thank you for your time. We hope you got value out of this class. If you have any questions, comments, or other discussions you'd like to have, be thinking them up, getting your hands up in the chat or dropping them in the chat because we're going to talk about them for as long as we have things to talk about. But first, let me show you where you can get copies of these slides and this recording. And I would encourage all of you to get copies of these slides. So if you need to give training classes to your own corps or your own people, you can just rip us off. Just have at it. We did the work. No point in you recreating the wheel. Take it, spindle it, change it around however you want. I dropped the link in the chat to the operations planning and readiness site. And here we have every single class we've done in folders. And each of these folders has a copy of the slideshow that also has the presenter's notes. So much of what I just went over, so much of what I just said, I didn't keep that in my head. I wrote it down ahead of time. You could do the exact same thing. And then a lot of these will have frequently asked questions and additional documents that you might find helpful. You can have those. And here's recordings of us having given the classes. So if you can't sleep at night and listening to me or Martin talk will help you do that, well, here you go. You just line these things up, hit play, and go off to the best dreams you ever had. And don't forget, you can also self-register this class as an external learning event in Cornerstone On Demand for 1CLP. What I do is I print the event invite as a PDF, I put that in as my documented proof. I was there. You could put me as your instructor and bank those CLPs, just like you can get if you teach the classes, because you get CLPs for listening to me and I get CLPs for talking to you. So, what are your questions? Questions, comments? What we got?
Hey, Stephen, this is Eric over at Muskogee.
Howdy.
So you mentioned, is the academy actually offering on-site courses now?
So, I got an answer on that. I believe it was last week. The VAAA in Frederick, Maryland, has not restarted in-person classes. However, they do have extensive offerings of virtual classes. And the last several courses I had to take to get my FACSI level 3, when that was a thing, I did virtually. I didn't have any problem with it. Depending on where you are in the country, you might have to get up extra early, but it works out. So no, they're not doing the in-person stuff yet, which I think, I understand why, but if you're interested in networking and you learn well from learning from others, the virtual stuff is not going to do it. It'll get the job done, but you're not going to be able to go out to dinner with these people. You're not going to be able to, help each other out as much as you could in person, and so on. And there's value in that. So unfortunately, right now it's just virtual, but there's plenty of it. Yeah, Crystal says
So,
networking is the best part of going to the academy, and it is. And they got some great food in Frederick, Maryland. Holy crap! Um, they know what they're doing with their seasoning. Yeah, go on Cornerstone On Demand and look up some of those classes and get in on the virtuals.
Yes, and I'm concurring with you, Stephen. And there's actually a class that's coming up in March. I'm going to put that information in the chat box.
Yeah, do it.
It's FLG 307. Is pertaining to you folks because it's advanced contracting and procurement.
Mm.
And right now, there's only 3 people enrolled. So we do need to get more people into the seats. If you're interested in taking it, that information is there. You can register in CSOD. I put the link in there as well in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to the supply chain school and the registrar. And those are hyperlinks when you see the blue there. So please, anybody that's interested, go in and sign up for that class. We really want to keep that offering. And if we get it, up to at least 16 people, that class is
Good deal. Good deal. And yeah, see, Penny, your comment, virtual instructors don't allow for students to have discussions. It's, it's a whole different thing. It gets it back to that out of sight, out of mind thing that I'd mentioned. Like even if the instructor does give you all time to have group discussions, I have found that virtual classes are fantastic excuses for people to hide. And so if you get frustrated by the phenomenon of being assigned a group project and then some people just try to shirk and not contribute as much as possible, the virtual classes, it can get really bad in that regard. Now, some of my virtual groups have been awesome. One of them was so bad that me and the other person doing work in our group had to go to the instructor like, look, these people are going to screw us over. Can you do something about it? And it was so bad, the instructor did do something about it. So yeah, there's definite downsides to it. The upside is that it's a lot cheaper for the government because they're not having to move us around. They're not having to put us in hotels. They're not giving us per diem to do that. You just stay in your house or in your office and close the door and do your class. But there's 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 cost to such efficiency. And yeah, good recommendation there, Simona. And Simona does know some things about classes. She is for the AUS. She is basically the schoolhouse. She helps set. Well, no, she doesn't just help set. She determines what's going to be in our curriculum. So she knows some stuff. If you got questions, Simona's a good person to talk to. Any other questions? I'm scrolling through the comments right now for things to comment on, but if you got stuff you want to talk about, let's do it. And Jeanette, you're right. It's not ripping off. It's follow VA standardization directive. That is right. Yeah. Take the training that other people did and tailor it for your own needs. Well, a lot of my early classes started with me ripping off NCO 20 and NCO 19's training officers because I asked them, "Hey, show me how you did this stuff." And they were like, "Here, have my PowerPoint slideshows." And I took them, and they're virtually unrecognizable now, but they gave me the start. Um, they, oh my God, down here. I'll let you know what classes I'll be in, so I can request you for my group. Unfortunately, I won't be in the FACSI certification classes anymore, at least the core ones, because I mean I'm grandfathered in. I'm good to go, but I definitely will be looking at some continuing education credits very soon, especially with the FACSI certification requirement going up to 100 to maintain them. I see that, Crystal Weeks dropped a government contracts reference book. I haven't seen that before, so I'm going to be. Can I
Yes, I
download
did
this?
ask for that. Because if Crystal, if you share that with me, I would be able to put it on the SharePoint for everyone on the AUS page and make sure that everyone has access to it.
Let's see. Is this something we got to buy, or is there digital copies of it available that we can get? Okay. All right. Well, that looks like I need to buy it there. We'll do some more looking into this.
Yeah, I'm sure there is somewhere. It's a book I've owned for quite some time, so I couldn't tell you exactly. I'm old school. I have paper books. I have a library.
And man, a paper FAR, that is
I do have a paper FAR with tabs.
So this is Marie. So you put the link. Oh, there it is. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna have to get this book. Huh.
Simona,
Interesting.
it's saying that there's no sessions available for that FLG 307. I just put it in the chat.
Oh my.
Interesting. So let me follow up with the school, and then I'll let you know if when they make a change to it. But
Yeah,
I
as
was
of like yesterday, there were slots available.
yeah, there usually are 24 slots per class, and only 3 people signed up. So that would mean there's 21 left. I would click.
Okay, Simona, I actually found that there's 2 different links. You gotta click the second one, and that one's working.
The hours. Yeah, they usually load 2 kinds in there. Okay. So can you put that screenshot in, and then folks can see which one to sign up for? Yep, that would be it.
Deal.
Perfect.
This is another comment from Jeanette. She must be our star commenter this time. Please consider doing a class on the Buy American Act. I believe changes have happened and are directed to occur through 2026. That's one that one of my COs would be best qualified to do, because we ran afoul of that, and he had to learn how to negotiate the thing. The Buy American Act is actually a spot I need to do some more studying on myself. So that's not to say we won't do a class in the future. It's just I'm not ready to do one right now. Next class is probably going to be on protests. So it's spicy and fun. And those things are important. Yeah, Joanne, I believe it's starting in 2024. So I think it's still just 80 CLPs up until 2024 to maintain your FAC-C. But after 2024, it's going up to 100 CLPs under the new standard to encourage people to do more continuous learning, which I think is an interesting take considering how perennially short-handed contracting is, that now all of our FAC-C certified contracting people are going to have to take an additional 20 hour or 10 hours a year to do this stuff, to do classes. I mean, it's good. Getting additional class time is good, but I don't know. Y'all get worked pretty hard as it is, and now we're gonna take a lot more time away from you. I don't know. That's kind of weird. Crystal, I would say you try to call somebody out by name, but what you said, it's not hard to maintain CLPs if you don't wait until the end. That applies to so many people. Like that's probably like 20% or more of contracting and cores that you called out right there. That's right. Because if you come to say your NCO does a monthly core training class and you go to that, AUSs are free to go to those core training classes. That's 12 CLPs a year right there. If you come to these classes, we do 2 a month. You could go to both sessions every month. That's 24 CLPs a year. You're already at 36 CLPs just from this. You already got a big headway. But people, yeah, they get freaked out when it's like a month to go and they've got to get 40 hours, and that's a bad place to be.
And
So
Stephen, I
yeah.
just want to interject and say, those CLPs can just be for any type of continuous learning. So if you're doing stuff in TMS that's related to your job,
Yep.
As Stephen pointed out, a lot of his classes are going into TMS, so that would count towards that. You can take other classes that are on the OPR SharePoint, but also if you're in any IPTs or any types of activities like that, the time that you do towards those activities can count as well. So you can look into CSOD and it shows you a process of how to do that if it's not a specific training. Yes, and you can get CLPs for training others too. So look at you, Stephen, getting your hours in for the next coming contract.
Well, you take a look at this this class we just did. I did 2 sessions of it, an hour apiece, 1 CLP apiece. I did a rehearsal, and so that's 3 hours. We're going to do a TMS recording, so that's 4 CLPs. I get 4 CLPs off of 1 class, and this one is a revision of the one I gave last year, so I didn't even have to put in as much work as the one I did last year, where I also got 4 CLPs. So, I mean, if you get to teaching this stuff, and you don't even have to teach it on a national basis like me and Martin and Simona are doing. Oh, and Martin gets the CLP for presenting as well because he's part of the presentation team, and he got a CLP for going to the rehearsal. You could do this for your cores. You can do this every month for your folks. How do you submit? Go ahead.
Stephen, I'm sorry, this is Marie from Vision 23. The problem that we're going to run into is that all cores expire in May 2024. A majority will wait until, I will say over 50% are going to wait until the last three months or so, and then, I got to get all this done. Vision 23 does a monthly training, just like you guys do. So in addition to this, plus the monthly training, right there is 24 CLPs.
And
it's not hard.
And Marie, would you be offended if someone who wasn't in Vision 23 wanted to come just sit on your team's call and get that CLP?
No,
so there
not
you go.
At all.
Everybody across the country, if you want an additional source of CLP farming, see Marie Kurtenbach.
Exactly. Steve Westoff and myself, I'll forward you the meeting invite. So
there you go.
Let me know.
Yeah,
I know this training that we're doing tomorrow, it's being put on by the Vision contracting team, is on declining balance sheets.
Well, that's helpful information.
Yes, so that's tomorrow's training, and whoever wants to be on, just let me know and I'll forward it to you. You'll get a CLP.
I see that's good information, and it's hitting key tasks that we didn't go over in this class, because the philosophy that I've pursued with the AUSPD series is you see what we've got. We start with the regulations because that's at the foundation of everything we do. Even what Marie just talked about, the regulations underpin the ability to spend any money. But the AUS, what are the things that we're supposed to do per the PD? I took a look at that and it looked like advise and assist, requirements package, because everything's tied to the requirements package. The submission to contracting, the solicitation, the award, the administration of the contract, the closeout of the contract, that all has its root in the requirements package. So my focus has been to hit that biggest target. And so the regulations, the requirements package, each document that goes in the requirements package. And Marty's been working on stuff like FITARA. This is a budget, it revolves around the budget tracking tool for IT spending. That's going to be a bigger and bigger thing that we are in fact responsible for doing on the facility side of the house. This, like if something goes wrong with the budget tracking tool, contracting is not going to be the ones who get yelled at the most. It's going to be the facility side of the house that gets hit with it. So Marty came up with this training. He's working on another one because the sheer amount of ignorance that we have about how to handle IT purchasing and contracting, it's enormous. Even I'm missing out on a lot of information for this. Contracting has a specialty certification just for IT related stuff. So it's important things. And then, I also focused on FACSI certification, getting that schoolhouse knowledge, because my classes are designed to take someone who doesn't know anything and get them basically capable of doing their job. But if you want to be an expert, you got to get the schoolhouse. And then auditing your contracts, contract administration kind of stuff. How do you handle your cores? That's educating them and managing them is an important part of the AUS job. How do you write sole sources? What's category management? So, big picture stuff. But what Marie just came up with that might seem really specific, but that's important. That's the stuff that helps support the big picture items that we're addressing. So it's a positive feedback loop. Like we talk about, this is what you're supposed to be doing in general. She's identifying a specific task. They're all good. They're all going to help.
And I want to bring up, you mentioned about FITARA. I will tell you, I have a monthly call, Steve Westoff and myself, where we meet with contracting, and they already have a list of contracts that need FITARA. And so we get that from NCO 23. We've established those meetings. So we know far in advance of FITARA approval. So
far in advance. Far.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it didn't work.
I caught it.
It wasn't good. Oh, and if you think that your supervisors may need or if they might benefit from a better picture of what the AUS does, we recently rolled out and did the first 2 live performances of the supervisor guide to the AUS job series. This is targeted at your supply chiefs, your deputy CLOs. It's only about 25 minutes and then plenty of time for talking afterwards. And both sessions had a significant amount of time after that 25 minutes where we're fielding questions from supervisor AUS's CLOs, and additional stuff might come from those conversations. So we're trying to get the AUS job series basically capable of what the PD says we're supposed to do and to best integrate them into VHA processes. Though, in some interesting news, the National Cemetery Administration may be interested in adding AUSs, and a friend I worked with in NCO1, he's now kind of an AUS for the Forestry Service in a certain region. And he was like, hey, dude, let me get a hold of your slides because my people need this. My contracting people need this. And so I shot those over to him, and he thought these things are amazing. And I told him, go ahead, use them. Just, let people know who you got it from. And that's all I'm worried about. And so, yeah, use this information, make it better. Anybody else got anything? We'll give it 2 minutes. So 121 Central Time, or well, we'll do 122 Central Time. If we don't have anything else to talk about, me and Marty will get on our way. But if we do, we will stick around. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate seeing you here. It's good to have you.